Greetings. My name is Luis Molina, and I'm the host of the Life Puro podcast. Today, I have Joseph Provenzano with us, who is a dear friend and coffee expert. So with that, Joe, what's up, man?
How you doing, man?
Not too
Doing
bad.
all right?
Is that a good title?
I don't know if I'd say expert, but
Yeah.
I have decades in as a passion, but I also fix and repair and do brand new installations on espresso machines and equipment. And so I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but very knowledgeable on the subject matter.
Yeah. So before we really dive into it, we like to offer our guests a cigar. You got your cigar ready? Let's cut and light. If you already got it cut, you can use your
Yes.
torch.
All right.
So today we are smoking the Tatuaje Kahonu 2018. So for people who don't know, Tatuaje is a boutique brand, I guess, of sorts, but they're definitely what I would consider a connoisseur's cigar. Out of Nicaragua for the most part, crafted by My Father Cigars. The Kahonu series was a series that he would try to release one blend, one size every 3 years. So the year he'll put so this is the Kahonu 2018. I think he's done the 2012, 2006, maybe. It's usually every 3 years. So just usually a kind of like a one-off type of blend, but fantastic. So I'll let you smoke it and then judge it. Give me some of your thoughts on it, because I know you're a Tatuaje fan as well.
Yeah, no, it's been a while since I've had one of these. Been so busy lately. I've barely had any downtime.
I know you haven't really smoked a lot of cigars, huh?
No, not lately, man. I've just been so busy. Or the company I have is not up to my liking. So, yeah. But no, it's been a while. So, yeah.
What other brands do you like? I'm sorry not to cut you off.
Lot 23 by Perdomo. Jaime Garcia Special.
Okay.
I keep forgetting the name. The ones we brought to the Keys trip.
Oh yeah, the Serie Españas.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Madrid and the Barcelonas.
Yeah, those are excellent cigars.
Yeah, I remember you liked it, and I like to get your input on.
Well, for a little while, I was before that trip. I don't know if it was just something was off from my humidor, or maybe I was just getting skunked out each purchase I made. But it seemed like the last few cigars leading up to our trip, they just weren't. I just wasn't, I don't know, enjoying it. And I'm like, man, is my taste buds changing? Like, what's going on? And then you brought those cigars, and I was like, okay, all right, it's not me. It's not any. It's just I just haven't been getting. I've been that's kind of the thing, you know. I mean, you try a new product, you're either, and it might take you a few different products till you nail something you like. And actually, we were supposed to be talking about coffee, and that's kind of a good way to start the conversation. Growing up,
similar dynamics, huh?
right? Growing up, my mother, her maiden name was DiMaggio. She always instilled Italian culture, big deal in the house. Grew up with what some people would call a mocha bialetti magineta, which is a little stovetop pot, and then she had an espresso machine, and grew up for the most part, enjoying it, thinking, oh man, it doesn't get any better than this. And then I went to a coffee shop up in New England that was run by Italians, and I ordered an espresso, and it completely changed my life. At that moment, I realized everything that I had ever been consuming was really not that good. I mean, it was good, but it's not this kind of good. And so you start wondering, man, what's the difference? And I wasn't caught up in all of the fact that these Italian people ran the place. It was just a really good product.
Yeah.
So and I don't have an issue with name dropping that product if it's all right with you.
Yeah. Yeah, look, you can curse, you can mention any name you want. This is unfiltered. It's up to you to decide what you want to talk about.
So the name of the company was Pasalacqua, and it's based out of Naples. And that was the brand that really got me to really, it went from, oh, let's have an espresso because it's what we do here in the family, to I need this in my life every day, every week. That was the thing that got me to really start paying attention to more of how to extract, make the coffee, machinery, all of that stuff. And I just went down this rabbit hole of just, and for everybody listening out there, this was before, this was probably, I'd say, I don't know, mid 90s, late 90s.
Okay.
Internet wasn't nearly as fast. It didn't have nearly the amount of information out there to grasp. So you really had to go through a lot of trial and error and research to really more or less execute what some people would refer to as the God shot, the good stuff. And
that one shot of espresso that go ahead. That, like you describe, it's so divine. It's hard to describe until one has actually had that.
Right. And
the God shot.
Right. And I've had people come to my house and they've professed, well, I don't like coffee. And that's okay. Or I don't,
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be hard to keep this lit because
I know
once I get the chit chat, boom.
Look, you wouldn't be the first person.
Right. And then we're talking about something I have a love for.
Yeah.
So.
You might not. You might not take care of the cigar. It's going to go out. That's all right. And so while there are pauses, I'll try to think of something else to kind of fill in so you can relight.
So I've had people come over to my house and they see the preparation that I'm executing to make the shot, and it piques their interest. And they're like, you know what? Even though I don't drink coffee, I'll try one. And once I let them try it, they're hooked. Now, not only do they want to come over to my house and have coffee all the time, but they want to get a machine. They're asking me questions about grinders and so on. And the sad reality is most consumers don't really care about that. And it's a cultural thing. It's a preference thing. Like the majority of people like big
in the U.S.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can't speak for the whole world because I have yet to see the whole world. I've traveled throughout Central America, Mexico. The only place in Europe I've ever spent any time at is in Italy. But in North America, in the States, most people like big cups of milk-based drinks, and and if you go to Starbucks, I mean, the choices for, your drink is endless. I mean, you can get anything and everything you want. I mean, the possibilities are just, it's unbelievable. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's not my thing, but you and I have talked about this over the years. Like, what is it that, what do you feel, you've asked me, why do you feel that it would be hard to get people to go towards consuming coffee the way they do in Italy? And I said, well, because a number of reasons. I don't know if they're all factual, but people look at something this big and they're like, oh, I'm going to pay $3 and
they're not getting value.
This.
Yeah.
They're not getting value.
Yeah.
They're looking at coffee in more of a terms of commodity, not really like quality or luxury. And I get that. I get that. And so, and then from a business standpoint, if you run a cafe, there's really no incentive to really execute espresso properly because, it's like anything else in the culinary world. I mean, I hate to use this, and I'm probably going to use this a few times as an analogy. Take the pizza, for example.
Another Italian product
that's been bastardized.
Yeah.
You take a pizza, and the more toppings you put on it, the less important the dough is. It's just a vessel at this point, a conduit for all the junk that's on top of it. Now, if you make a pizza and just have tomato on it with a little olive oil, you're going to know immediately if this dough is good or it tastes like a rubber biscuit, And it's kind of like that with coffee. I mean, if you're running a business, well, what is the point of me making sure this espresso is oh so good when they're going to get all this milk in it, or almond milk, or matcha, or candy sprinkles, or whatever, turmeric root.
Yeah, turmeric.
I don't know.
Have you seen turmeric root in some coffees now?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably pulverized.
Yeah, but still.
When I first started fixing equipment in some of these cafes, And granted, for everybody listening, I was born in '74, so I'm kind of out of the loop on a lot of stuff. But I had to ask my coworker, the other mechanic. I was like, dude, what the hell is a matcha? Like I had no clue what it was, you know. Like it did. I was like, what is that? And then he had to explain it to me, you know, and it just, you know, that's not where my heart lies, my passion lies. It's and
The purist.
My wife thinks I make great cappuccinos. If I make, I don't know, 2 dozen cappuccinos in a year, that's a lot. The one thing I will say that I can execute very well is a real espresso.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and that's something you really don't see anymore. That's not
in the States. So,
in the States.
So for those people listening or viewing who don't know about coffee, what is espresso? Maybe let's go. Can you give me like the rundown of all the different kind of coffee beverages?
You mean not pertaining to espresso?
Yeah, like there's like the drip style, like you said, like
there's pour over.
Yeah, okay.
There's what I guess somebody's out there still using it, but it was real popular in the 50s and 60s, the percolator method. You know, which is, you know, you put the grounds in the middle, you boil the water at the bottom, and then it comes up and percolates over the grounds. But a lot of people had a lot of negative things to say about it because it keeps recirculating the water. Personally, I've never drank out of a percolator. I know how they operate. You have the drip method. You have cold coffee, cold brew. One of my favorites was what I use every morning because I'm just too tired to deal with the espresso machine, is a little Bialetti. Those are very popular. And going back to the industry, some of these high-end machines, these fully automated touchscreen machines, and I'll say it, in my opinion, now I've had coworkers tell me you can program them and you can tweak them to where they make the genuine article, just like in Europe, but I haven't seen it here. Not saying you can't do it, but so far from what I've seen of these machines, they produce espresso, not espresso. Something that resembles espresso, but it's not really, you know? And you could get the same beverage out of a $30 mocha pot, you know? I mean, granted, you can't run a business with a mocha pot, but...
For like the volume, involved?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember that story you told me, espresso.
Right.
Versus like, no, it's espresso. Espresso.
Right. Yeah. You know, and, you know, so it's just, and that's where the industry's headed, you know, because like today out in the field, I worked on 2 of what some people would refer to as a traditional machine. It's a semi-automatic, and that pretty much means semi-automatic. All that means is that the barista or whoever's operating the equipment is responsible to make the right size grinds, tamp it, make sure everything's heated properly, and then engaging the portafilter into the group, and then you press a button. So that's why it's semi-automatic. A fully automatic machine is what it does is it grinds, it tamps, and it delivers the coffee all with the push of a button. And I know for people out there listening, they're probably thinking, oh, man, why wouldn't I just go with that? That sounds like nirvana. And that's
convenient. Yeah.
Right. And that we're all big about convenience, you know, and it is convenient. But I guess an analogy I would use is this, is that it gives you something. If you're chasing the genuine article, that's just not, I haven't seen the machine, a fully automatic, produce that. Not saying it doesn't exist. Somebody might listen to this and be like, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But hey, I've been working on these machines for years. I've been fooling with this for a long time. And as I had stated earlier, I'm not an expert, but I do know a lot. And yeah, they just make something that's, you know, pleasing to most people. But you have to.
It's passable, right?
It's passable.
From a
it's
commercial,
plausible,
yeah,
right.
from a commercial standpoint. And we've talked about this ad nauseum too. Going back to like if one is a coffee business operator, retailer, right, cafe in the U.S., there really isn't an incentive for that owner to invest, whether it be in the right machinery or the right training for their staff, for the baristas,
Right.
or buy the good quality coffee, because at the end, the consumer's going to bastardize it pretty much with sugar or milk or other
Exactly.
additives.
They're
So I
gonna-
get it from a
The
standpoint.
consumer doesn't really care. They're looking for the comfort, ease. I mean, let's be honest. Starbucks, there's people that show up there every day. And if
Yeah.
you do the math, just on a low ball, I mean, if you're in there every day, you're on a minimum, you're spending probably anywhere from $6 to $12 a day. So it's not like money's the main thing. I mean, people want bang for their buck, but they also want convenience. Okay. But as you were saying before, as a business owner, I would assume it really doesn't make good business sense to invest in a very superior product, because as we've talked about, most people are just going to put all the additives they want in it. And the more additives you put to it, the less.
It's going to mask the coffee.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of has me so behooved over this light roast single origin movement. And it's like, well, what's the point of all of that if you're going to put all of this stuff in it anyway? You know, I mean, I could sit here for hours and talk about just that topic alone. But, you know, so it really, as a business owner, you're really not incentivized to get any. And then any business, you know how it is. You're a business owner. You know, you invest a lot of time and effort into training somebody. And that somebody, this could be a mere stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're just like, you know what, I found some place that pays me a little bit more, and they're gone, and you took a gamble on all that time and effort to train them, and they're out of there. So I get it from a business standpoint to move to fully automation.
Right.
You know, I don't have any ill will towards the businessman and what why he's doing what he's doing. But I guess that's where my Italian heritage comes in. It's like, can we just call it something different? Does it really have to be called espresso? Because it's really not.
Well, I guess it's espresso.
Can we? I mean, look, George, they called it Nespresso. I mean, it's kind of different, you know, because it's not real.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good enough, you know. But I get it from a business standpoint. I understand that.
But because of that dynamic, I find, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or corroborate, because of like these business moves, it keeps the culture in America the way it is and different from Italy.
Right.
So I have insight. You have insight. We've both been to Italy. I went I think it was in 99 with David Lesh. And I saw firsthand, when I saw like the first espresso bar coffee operation in Italy, I was like, this is nothing like in America.
Right.
Like it's not even like snooty, but it's the culture they have there.
And so that's what your listeners should understand.
We're not trying to be snooty, but like,
and that's the thing. Like a lot of people, when they hear that type of rhetoric, they're like, "Oh, those higher than thou people."
Yeah.
And it's really not that. Like the reason why Italian people get so passionate or so, you know,
tense about
these subject matter, it's not because they're being snooty. It's really because that's their identity. It's kind of like imagine, if you will, a big company like a Starbucks, or I don't know, call this big company, I don't know, Gumbo Yaya Corporation, and they hail from Minnesota.
Oh, here
and
we
they
go.
come down to Louisiana and open up all these shops and try to tell you how to make gumbo.
They put tomato in the gumbo.
If you're a native Louisianian, you're going to get offended. You know why? Because it's a part of your identity. It's a part of your culture. So it's the same thing in Italy. It's not that they're being snooty, but you're kind of like disrespecting everything that they represent, so to speak. So it's not them being snooty. It's just, and they are anal about their, you know, I mean, look, there's a reason why people flock there to eat. It's because these people really give a shit about the food, you know. So
and I got a sense of that having gotten to know you over the years. Even the way you treat your cooking and your food, it's a ritual. It's not being snooty. It's not being, because you're not like buying the most expensive product.
no.
But you have this care in how you treat the food, how you cook it properly, like step by step, even how you serve it. Like it's something almost like you're treating it divine.
Yeah.
It's not just intaking calories and stuffing your face,
No, it's
getting it
not.
over with,
No.
or
No,
pretending like, oh yes, I can taste this and that. Like it's kind of hard to convey, I guess, but
You've been there. You've been to my house countless times. I mean, how many times have someone said, "What did you put in this?" And when I name 3 ingredients, they They still don't believe me.
Right.
I give them the recipe, and they're like, they'll go home, and they'll completely fuck it up. They're like, man, it doesn't taste like yours. And I already know what they did before they even tell me what they did. And when I call them out on it, they're like, yep, that's exactly what I did.
And what is usually the culprit?
Well, people here, and I don't know, I can't speak for the whole state of Louisiana, but in certain areas, people have a tendency to get heavy-handed with garlic.
Mm-hmm.
Garlic.
Yeah.
And I love garlic just like the next guy, but it will take over a dish. Same thing with oregano. Oregano's delicious, but if you
Like, yeah.
it'll take the whole dish over. You won't taste anything else going on in there, you know? I mean, like I've told people, the most important ingredient in cooking is restraint. That's the most important ingredient.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you go hog wild with one. And look, man, I'm guilty. I've been the rules. Sometimes I get a little crazy with things, and sometimes I get away with it, and sometimes I taste it like, yeah, I fucked that up.
Yeah. But at least you are willing to be transparent and honest with yourself in that, okay, I messed this up.
Right. All right. You can't take criticism, man. You shouldn't even be bothered cracking a pan, you know?
But isn't that like, you've told me stories about how maybe certain people in the past are very apprehensive to cook for you because they know that you are, I don't know, they have this fear like, man, this guy really knows or appreciates food. I'm intimidated to cook for him.
I've had people tell me that before. And I, like my wife, for example, she'll get a little stressed out or whatever. She cooks for me, or she'll overthink things. And I'll tell her, I was like, honey, I had to learn this too. And I've screwed up, I don't know how many dishes. And just because you feel like I'm really good today, I could screw something up tomorrow night or next week. I'm not this holier than thou. I'll never mess something up again. I mean, it happens, you know, and you just can't let that get in your way. You just got to chalk it up and be like, okay, I screwed this one up. At least I know now what I did wrong. I'm not doing it again.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, it wasn't like you said, it didn't take you overnight to master even the culinary world. Like you're still learning, I'm sure.
From the womb to the grave, you never stop learning.
Yeah, man.
Ever.
Yep.
And if you should share with people about the first time you had an espresso.
I was going to tell, yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So to your point, I remember you just described that kind of scenario, and it happened with me. Before I met you and was invited to your house for Sunday dinners, before that first shot you served me, I was guilty of being the typical American, thinking that coffee's coffee. Like there's no big deal about it. And that's kind of sad because I don't know if you know my family history back in El Salvador. A lot of my other family members are in the coffee industry. They grow a lot of coffee bean in El Salvador. So I should have like been a little bit more appreciative of that, but I just didn't understand like serving. There's different things that can go on where it could just taste just like a commodity, like you've said.
Right.
But it wasn't until I had your espresso that I realized, oh my God, like I had this epiphany. I had no idea what I was missing out on. With the way you served that espresso, I think it was Pasta L'Acqua.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Via, what machine was that finally retired?
So, okay.
Yeah.
We should talk about that machine.
Yeah.
I still have that machine. And if I do find the parts that I need, I will once again resurrect that machine, as I've done with many other machines. So my mother, when I was, I was probably somewhere in the age of 8 or 10 years old. She brought home a machine from Italy. It was a semi-commercial machine, but it was more geared towards the home, and it was called a Gaggia. It is a semi-automatic, and you know, she did what a lot of the people do. You know, they get hot and heavy for something, and after the thrill of it is worn off, it goes in the closet somewhere. So she fooled with that thing for a few years, and then it went in the garage, and she went back to the comfort and ease of the maginette, the little bitty mocha pot, you know?
Okay.
And I can remember seeing it in my non-climate controlled garage, taking on humidity, weather temperature, dampness, just sitting there. And for everybody listening, this was before you could grab your phone and be like, porter filter for 8, Gaggia, whatever, and come up with 1,000 things. This wasn't like that back then. And the reason I never tinkered with it because I couldn't find the portafilter for it. And then one day looking for a spatula, I found the portafilter.
Okay.
So then I basically just painstakingly wrote down, cataloged how I ripped the whole thing apart. This was before I got trained on how to work on these machines. And put it all back together. And that machine, you have to bear in mind, sat in the garage for years. And I was banging out awesome espressos for almost another 20 years until a part finally gave way and I couldn't get that part. And so it's sitting in my garage now. But that just goes to show you the level of quality. When I pulled that machine apart, that's when I found out exactly how old it was. It was built in 1985.
Okay.
And if I would have had that part, it'd still be used today.
And you don't think there's any way you can find that part?
Mm-hmm. I just, after a few months, I gave up.
Yeah.
I just said, to hell with it. I need my fix. And that's when I bought the lever machine.
Yeah.
You know, which is...
Can you describe that a little more detail? What's the brand?
The lever machine, I really fought hard. At first, I wasn't going to get it because I thought it was going to be one of these things where the learning curve is steep on how to use one of those. You know, it's not rocket science. It's not like, you know, it's not that difficult. But if you're somebody who wants the same product, the same output day in, day out with little to no effort, this is not the machine for you. It's not. And when people ask me about it, I'm like, don't buy one of these. Not because they're bad machines. They're great machines, but you really got to be in it for the journey. If you just want your thing to somewhat resemble what it did the day before and the day before and the day before, don't get this machine. Because what it does is so there are two type of manual lever machines. There's the spring piston machine where basically you pull it down and you lock it into place. And there's a huge coil, a spring, and then when you release it, it does, you know, that spring starts elevating up and then it starts the extraction process. And whereas mine is not a spring piston, it's a manual lever. So there is no help at all. This right here is it's the pump.
Is that where the true like manual machine comes from? Like where they even derive that term pulling a shot?
Mm-hmm. In fact, that terminology is still used in the industry from the manager at Starbucks all the way to somebody owning a boutique cafe. It is called pulling a shot, but nobody's pulling shots anymore. Maybe at the train station in Naples, Italy.
Yeah.
But so you lift up the handle, the water siphons into the group and saturates what is called the puck, the grounds that are tamped. And then there's different ways you can tweak that to your liking, you know, it also depends on the roast profile too. Sometimes the longer saturation period is better for a darker roast. And then you can kind of pre-infuse, which some of these high-end machines do that with a button or a lever, which is pretty cool. And then you lift up again and then you extract it. And you know, before I bought the machine, I had read so much about it because I was really leery about buying one because I was worried that I might get frustrated in the journey, you know, but every article I read said once you learn it and you master it and you lick it, it will give you the same quality, if not a better, more denser quality than a $15,000-$20,000 machine. And I will tell you, and I don't care what anybody says to me, and I'm not sitting here getting poetic, I'm just giving you the hard truth. Yeah, once you nail that lever machine, it's just as good as some of these 30,000 3-group machines I go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get that God shot almost every time.
But you're gonna have a lot of times where it just doesn't. Humidity, temperature, grind being off. It's really a journey. If you're gonna get a lever machine, you just got to go into it knowing, all right, today it's gonna be Nirvana. Tomorrow it might be, but rest assured, it'll be any better than anything you go out on the street and buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the name of that machine? What's the name of the brand or company?
The one that I have?
Yeah.
La Pavoni.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's so many other brands. I actually, and one of the reasons I went with that brand, not saying it's the best, but one thing I was researching about it, because if you remember earlier, we were discussing how I couldn't get the part from my mother's old machine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this design has basically remained almost completely unchanged for decades, and the parts are very easy to get a hold of. So I said to myself, well, the learning curve is steep. It's not the most fancy machine, but if something breaks, I can get the parts and I can fix it. And it's and believe me, it's easy to fix.
Yeah.
It's super easy to fix. I mean,
But even, is it like, so you come from being a tradesman by nature?
yeah, for anybody out there, I used to work in construction. I worked in carpentry, framing, and then I went to trade school. I apprenticed in the union. I'm a licensed electrician.
Right.
And then,
So for you, the cliff to jump off of wasn't that bad.
no,
But for someone like me that I don't know machinery, I'm not an engineer.
right. But if you had a Pavoni, I guarantee I can teach you how to rip that thing apart
Okay.
in an hour.
Okay.
I promise you.
It's that analog where even if you teach me.
It's archaic. It's primitive. You know, it's bare bones and easy to it's easy to service. It's easy to change out a part.
Would a proper analogy be like Pavoni is to a 63 or 65 Lincoln as the machines in Starbucks is to like today's like
Right.
Tesla?
Right, and believe it or not, like I also service and repair Starbucks machines, and that I may not be a fan of the Starbucks,
Model, yeah.
but I don't have, but their machines are actually pretty robust. I mean, they are. I wouldn't own one, but I don't need one. I'm at the house. But,
Yeah.
But they put out a lot of product. They're fairly consistent with the product they put out, and dude, they take a beating. But yes, you could not open up that machine without the knowledge. I had to actually go take a class in Houston in order to work on those machines. But your analogy was perfect. Some of these older, or what we call in the industry traditional machines, whether it's a lever machine, spring piston, semi-automatic, you're right. Opening up one of those is the difference between opening the hood on a 55 Chevy and then opening a hood on a 2024 Honda Civic. It's, you don't need a computer. There's no diagnostic testing. I mean, they're fairly. Another thing too, I'm going to say too, is that even though the industry is going towards this whole super automatic touch screen, let's take the barista out of the equation and let's get our profit margins higher. I will say this: there's a catch-22 to that. Because some of these machines, just like any piece of technology, it takes a while to work out the quirks. And
Like to break in, huh?
yeah, not only that, I mean, the maintenance on these machines, if they're not tip top, you now you're into it for a lot of money because they have a lot more problems than a traditional machine.
Is that kind of like what you hear about like Lamborghini, where they're awesome engineering wise, but like any little glitch, like, man, you got to now service that, and it's a fortune to service that. Is that kind of valid?
Yeah, I guess there's some validity to what you're saying, but yeah, I mean, it's
like they're so sensitive almost
right.
to the point
Like
of,
I'll give you an example if this helps convey, like translate to what I'm trying to tell you. Like on a lever machine or a traditional machine, there is no motherboard. Now on some of the newer models, the ones that have been coming out, I don't know, in the last, I say newer, but 10, 20 years, I don't know. They do have what is called volumetrics, where there's these electronically controlled scales in the drip tray that when it disperses a certain amount of liquid, it cuts the shot off. So even with the traditionals now, you're starting to get into more computer.
little more digital.
Yes. But still, even so, those are a lot more robust than the touch screen ones. I mean, the touch screens it's basically like opening up a calculator or a modem. I mean, they have all the components like a traditional machine. A piston, O-rings, gaskets, all that stuff. But they have all of this intricate stuff going on in there as well. And another thing that I think now that I've been working on these machines for a while, going back to Italy, in their culture, once a certain time passes throughout the day, nobody's ordering milk-based drinks. Now, I'm not saying
Oh,
that,
I've noticed that. Yeah, I remember
right.
that. Yeah.
Now, look, man, I don't live there. There could be some dude, Luigi, lives down the street, and he's always got to have his like that. And everybody in the piazza knows who he is. But for the most part, nobody's drinking milk-based drinks. And whether you have a traditional machine or one of these super automatics, anytime you introduce frothing or steaming milk, it puts a more strain on the machine. And when you have a super automatic, instead of someone being back there steaming the milk, it goes through a siphon tube into this machine. It's pretty impressive when they work right, and it spits out some pretty dense, thick, foamy milk. But if your staff, and we've talked about this, the staff that's like, I'm only going to be here for a little while, if they don't keep up with maintenance and cleaning procedures with those siphon milk, you're talking breakdown, pull the whole machine apart, real headache.
But for you, it's kind of funny because you profit from that, right?
Oh,
you're incentivized, like your business model.
Right. Yeah. If
You love the
if
breakdowns.
all I had to do was work on traditional machines, man, I'd have to go hang sheetrock or get some other kind of job because they don't really break as much.
You'd be like the Maytag man, right?
Right.
It's like just sitting around, like waiting for some breakdown. So it's kind of weird, but and don't worry, the train, you got the train here. It actually won't be bad when we play back, but for people who don't know, there's a train that comes by. We were thinking about like doing like some little like game where the train comes by, like, oh, you win a prize. All right, you got the train.
Yeah. I mean,
But anyway,
but yeah, my stepfather, who just recently passed, my stepfather-in-law, listen to me, who just recently passed away, he came from Cuba. And anybody that's listening, I'm sure there's a lot of cigar smokers going to be listening to this.
That's right.
They know that Cubans.
There's a connection, yeah.
Yeah. Cubans, they're big into espresso. I mean, they call it cafe cubano, cafecito, and all that stuff, but they're big into that. And when he used to come to my house for dinner and whatnot, and I would make him espresso, he would tell me. He was like, this is, and I guess you could sit there and ponder, was he just saying this to be nice? Which could be, but he used to say, this is way better than any of the Cuban coffee I've ever had. And he's like, you really need to open up a shop. And I used to always argue with him. I'm like, man, I would love to. I'm very passionate about it, but I'd be the only person that really cares. Most people want to come in and, be like, hey, I want, can you put some condensed milk in it? And I'd be like, yeah, you see the door? Like, you got to go. I don't run that kind of operation. And before you know it, I'd be out of business.
Right.
I
know. We've discussed this ad nauseum for like the last 10 years. Like, could a concept like the Italian way work in this country? And I don't know. It's such a risky proposition. On the one hand, you would differentiate yourself from other coffee shops.
Also, it depends on where the shop is.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Like I remember, and we've talked about this as well, and there's a place in New Orleans called Ancora's Pizzeria. Mm-hmm. And I remember when they were opening up, they had a pizza oven that produced, it had all the parameters to meet the qualifications for an Italian-style pizza. And when they first were about to open up, in my mind, I'm like, they're never going to make it. They're never going to make it. Nobody's going to, people are going to want to come up in there and want their pineapple and Canadian bacon and, freaking, marshmallows, whatever the fuck else they put on them. They're going to go out of business. And here they are. How long have they been in business now?
Oh, man.
Years. And
15 years, maybe longer.
Yeah, but I think it also has a lot to do with the area they decided to open up in. It wasn't the suburbs. It was very I don't know, a part of town where people are a little bit more, what should I say, experimental or
a little more progressive in the culinary front.
Right.
Open-minded, maybe?
Like if they would have opened this up in some little town where somebody just wants their, pizza, I think they would have went out of business. I really do.
Yeah.
But, you and I have also touched base on this. When Subway first came here, I remember, I grew up in New Orleans and, growing up as a kid, you wanted a sandwich. If you didn't make it at home, you just went and got a po' boy. They were dotted. They were ubiquitous. I mean, they were all over the city. And when Subway first came to New Orleans, I said, that ain't never going to make it here. Never. And boy, I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, just to let you know, Ancora opened in June of 2011. And this is according to their website. It was instrumental in the revitalization of Ferret Street. Yeah, because remember, that was kind of like a war zone back then.
Oh, there used to be a boxing gym right next door. And, yeah, because I don't know if you want to touch base on that, but I used to fight in the amateurs, boxing.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go train over there and spar over there. And I mean, yeah, when you went there.
It was a war zone, huh?
There was prostitutes up and down the street, people strung out on dope. It was not a pleasant place. And all of a sudden one business opened up and then another business. And I think it was post-Katrina.
Yeah, it was post-Katrina.
And I remember doing an electrical job on the same block that Ancora's is on. And I remember reading an article and seeing them bring the pizza oven in. And I can remember saying to myself, that's not going to work.
Oh, man.
And I was wrong. You know, I was wrong.
So perhaps maybe there is a chance for a Neapolitan-style cafe.
I think you have to have enough capital, enough to ride out the storm.
Right.
And you'd either have to have a very cheap lease or, I don't know. But I am a believer in this. If you could afford to give away samples, you know, of the way it's meant to be, I don't know if you grab enough market share to keep the lights on, but you would definitely you would transform people. You would bring them over.
Because I'm a big believer in the concept of the quality rises to the top. It might take some time, right? Because now you're reconditioning a market
norms, right, yeah.
So it's going to take time for sure. So you're going to have capital to survive those
to weather
first
that
few months
storm, and it's going to be a storm.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you're going to have people like, if you did it the Italian way, you don't have like the seating where people can lounge there all day. Like when you go to Italy, to give insight to people that maybe have never visited Italy, when you go to a coffee spot, they're not lounging there like these college kids all day. Like it's almost like a pit stop. You go in there.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have some people that sit at the bar, stare endlessly at soccer games.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people come in.
But it's kind of in and out.
It's in and out. A little chit chat, blah blah blah, and then they roll out.
Yeah.
You know, and now I've never traveled to the north of Italy, but I have been told that there's a lot of sit down cafes there.
Oh, okay.
But for people that have never been there, what I've been told is you pay for the privilege of sitting. Which is another reason why a lot of Italians don't sit, at least in the south of Italy. For everybody listening, the south is where all the poor people are. But that's where the good food is, too.
Right.
And all the pizza, all the things you hold near and dear, that all came from the south.
What Americans think of Italy is represented in the south, huh?
Right.
And Sicily.
I've known people that have went to Italy, but they went to all the flagship areas in the north, and they're like, man, the food was nothing like what I thought it was going to be. I didn't really care for it much. And I'm like, well, you know, I don't know if I'd go that far because those people are pretty prideful. It's just a different execution of food. Whereas in the South, everything, whether you're Italian or not in this country that you know of, you know, food-wise, that all came from the migration of all the poor people from the south of Italy.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might not be able to go to the deli in Florence and get a meatball.
Yeah. No, I remember in Florence when I went, because that was one of our stops when I went with Dave. They had this sandwich shop that was actually really good. It's nothing like the sandwich shops here. I mean, it's just better. I mean, it's just different, like very good. You can tell it's high quality.
Also, too, with the way they view things, too, over there is simplicity.
Yeah. And that's what it is. To your point about great cooking is usually simple cooking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good. This is, you know, I guess now with the Food Network and all the plethora of shows they have, I think more people are know that now.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, I mean, you go to Italy and it's whether you have lineage there or not, it's life-changing, you know. And I'm sure you said you went to Spain. I mean, that's also probably was totally blew your mind the way they eat and live. And yeah, it's
different. I was just listening to another podcast last night. They were talking about the differences in how people dine in Europe, especially like in the Latin. When I say Latin, Italy, France, and Spain. It's not like in America where I feel like here they're trying to turn and burn tables.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very fast. In Europe, especially in like the Mediterranean or Latin, when you go to sit down, great service is actually slow service.
Right.
You don't want that waiter just on top of you all day
Right.
because you're there to talk.
Well, it's one of the
with
reasons
people.
I refuse to eat on Valentine's Day.
Oh,
They want to hurry up and turn it over.
yeah.
You know, and dude, the waiters are stressed out.
Yeah.
Everybody's up their ass.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably like the worst night to go.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I know some guys get roped into that. I don't.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? So, but yeah, it's a totally different experience over there, and it's like you said, it's all about simplicity and execution,
Mm-hmm. But like in Spain, they didn't have, in my opinion, the coffee game like they did in Italy.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I will, to me, put Italy in the top of how they, in terms of their philosophy of how they blend, roast, grind, serve, and consume.
So I'm glad you touched base on that, and now we're really going to get into the thick of it.
Okay.
Because I'm going to be brutally honest about how I feel about this. And I'm sure some people are going to watch this and be like, man, that dude's nuts. And that's okay, And then, hey, look, if that's your thing and you like that,
Yeah.
well, then by all means,
And I'm not
disparaging.
we're not disparaging the coffee culture in this country.
Yeah, what I'm about to say, I'm not trying to tell you I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah,
I'm just telling you how I feel. Like, I've actually read articles where people in the coffee industry are now so bold as to say, well, the Italians, they kind of have it wrong.
Oh, wow.
They buy inferior coffee. Because they don't want to pay the exorbitant amount of money for coffee in Italy. So they buy inferior coffee. They don't care. They're not concerned about single origin, farm to table, and they over roast their coffee. And they basically, some of these people who've probably only been in the game for, let's just say their father was in it, which that's bullshit. But they've probably been in the industry for, I don't know, 10 plus years. I hate to say it, probably less, but all of a sudden they're an authority on it.
Yeah.
You know? And we have a friend who also jumped on this. Well, this country has terrible coffee beans and that country has better coffee beans. And all of those things might very well be true. I'm sure there's some legitimacy to that. But what I tried to tell him and what I might try to tell your listeners in order for them to kind of think about it is, say you and I decide after this show we're going to go to your house and we're going to have a competition about who cooks the best steak. And a guy over here, you give him the best cut of meat imaginable. And then you give me some wrap steak from Rouse's. And then he cooks his and I cook mine. And then mine blows his away. And the point of this story is you can give somebody the best steak in the world. If they don't know how to cook it, if they don't know what they're doing, it means nothing because they're going to burn it or they're going to ruin it. Meanwhile, if you give somebody who's been cooking steaks, since they were a little kid and their grandfather and it's a family affair, that person's going to take a very mediocre, subpar piece of meat, and he's going to taste even better. And that's what the Italians have. Their roasting capability from just stretches for generations.
Yeah.
And so even if that they buy inferior product, which I don't know if they do or not, to be honest, but one thing I do know, they know how to roast and blend.
They know how to work with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas you could give somebody the greatest. Like, I'll give you an example, Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. Okay? Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee is phenomenal. It is great. But don't think you're going to go to Jamaica and get a good cup of coffee. It was colonized by the British. Most of those people are tea drinkers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, they grow a superior crop, But to roast and blend, that's not their field of expertise. And a lot of their crop goes to Italy.
This notion can be used in our industry. So you look at the Cuban sector. Before the revolution, the Cubans had arguably some of the best land, but they also had the knowledge of how to harvest, ferment, blend the tobacco. So that's why Cuba had this appointment of being like known as like the best cigars in the world. But when the revolution occurred, Castro displaced a lot of the families with the knowledge. So those family members took that knowledge to other countries. Like initially, a lot of them went to the Canary Islands. A lot of people don't know that. The Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, even Spain. And so those people were the ones responsible for that knowledge of how to work the tobacco. And they went to these new lands that were maybe somewhat inferior, but because they had the knowledge, they knew how to perfect it. And now it's gotten to the point, and I know I'm going to ruffle some feathers, especially from the Cuban sector. My opinion is that the Cuban families that are outside of Cuba are making better tobacco than the Cubans in Cuba. It's because the people that were left over in Cuba were maybe the poor staffers that just got told what to do, but they didn't understand the art of how to work that tobacco.
Right.
But because of that reputation before 1960, they're still like with a lot of like this authority.
Correct. I get that.
Which is weird to say because actually the best cigar for me that I ever had was a Cuban cigar. So they have potential, but it's so inconsistent. And that's the problem. Whereas, say, like a Nick Perdomo, who is of Cuban descent, who's had family members, be political prisoners of Castro, they had the knowledge. So when they went to Nicaragua, they were masters of how to work tobacco. And one could arguably say that Cubans are still making the best cigars in the world.
Right.
They're just not in Cuba.
Right. And another thing, too, that some people might not think about, like you were saying, some of the workers or middle echelon were left behind, but they didn't have all the knowledge.
Yep. They had the resources, the ingredients.
And I can tell you, when I used to work on these big construction jobs, and I was working my way to being a journeyman, and I'd be on these big construction jobs, and a lot of these old timers, these old mechanics, they would teach you tricks of the trade. They would teach you all this knowledge, but not all of them, but some of them, they wouldn't teach you everything because they knew you were younger. Okay. So they knew once they taught you everything, you were going to work. They were talking themselves out of a job.
They were going to be obsolete.
Exactly. Because they were going to know that you're younger, more able-bodied. Now you have all their knowledge. So they're not going to share everything with you because they won't have a fucking job.
Plus, they're getting probably a higher pay rate.
Exactly.
And if a boss man or capitalist knows that, hey, the younger people have that same knowledge and I can get away with paying them less, let's get rid of the old timers with their experience.
Right.
Because it'll be cheaper for us for labor.
It'll be cheaper. And not only that, the younger guys work faster. So who knows? Maybe those old Cuban guys that they didn't even want to share that information for fear that, that stuff
becoming irrelevant.
Oh, yeah. My mom had to be on her deathbed before she gave me her meatball recipe.
Dude, I love that story. Can you expand on that?
So,
and I guess the notion of a meatball, again, you informed me and illuminated me on what the concept of the meatball was.
Oh my God, we went from coffee to meatballs.
Yeah, we're hitting all the
yeah. Oh man, you got a Kleenex?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, that's another one of those things. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think I do if you need it. Yeah.
But anyway.
And it's passion, right? Like
it is.
People might laugh at this,
and I don't blame them.
And I don't want to cut you off, but like, some people will laugh at the Italians, and why do they care about I don't know if Miro showed you that video of this kid. This is how many times I pissed off Italians this year, and he purposely went into like shops and kind of being disrespectful, pouring pizza on a ketchup. And he wants the reaction of
on a pizza.
What's that? Yeah.
You flip-flopped that for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, putting ketchup on a pizza. Or breaking the pasta. Like he's being disrespectful of the way that Italians have treated their product for a laugh. But these Italians like get mad. Like there was one shop owner, he saw him pouring that ketchup on a pizza. He took that ketchup bottle and just threw it, was like getting violent towards him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as we were saying earlier, I used the gumbo analogy.
Yeah.
You know,
for people in Louisiana listening, they should know. Yeah.
Like you know, somebody comes along from another part of the world and tries to tell you how to make gumbo. You know, it's
incorrectly.
not
right?
saying
like
that these people are not going to make good gumbo, but let's, you know, more than likely they shouldn't be telling you how to do it.
Well, tomatoes traditionally don't go in gumbo. And
Right.
I've seen some of those.
Well, Creole,
I think Disney.
I want to say, now, I'm not an authority, but I want to say, and I could be wrong, because gumbo, as you know, is different in every parish. Sometimes it's different neighborhood to neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I want to say, and somebody's probably going to chime in on this, I thought the difference with Creole gumbo was either the addition of tomato, because a lot of things in the New Orleans spectrum, if tomatoes are added to it, it's somehow
Creole.
gets labeled Creole.
It's Creole, yeah.
Right.
Versus like Cajun or Acadian.
Right. And a lot of people, my mother told me this, and she was not Cajun or any of that, but she grew up in New Orleans, and my mother said, and I looked at her weird when she told me this. She said, not every gumbo has to have a roux. And I was like, well, how's that? You know, and then years ago, a group of us went to go to some restaurant. You might remember the name of it. It was a lady that ran it. You had to have 10 people to go there. I don't know if she was in one of the Bayou parishes, and she put out a gumbo, and she came up to all of us and asked each person, like, could you tell me what was different about my gumbo? And of course, people like, it had sassafras, or, you know, it had, you know, this, or it had that, or it was this type of roux. And she's like, no. And she got to me, I was really scared because I was like, oh my God, I hope I don't offend this woman.
Yeah, she's putting me on the spot.
Oh God, but I'm going to guess that it doesn't have a roux. And so I said, it doesn't have a roux. And she goes, you're right. And everybody at the table looked at me like I was crazy. But I can remember my mom telling me that, you know, so.
But going back to like the meatball, I'm sure even in Italy, one neighborhood might have their version of what a meatball is. But describe the origin of the meatball. Why was that developed in Italy?
So I can't tell you the exact origin, to be honest with you. But what I can tell you is this, is that most of the power and the money and the control was all in the north of Italy. And most of the people in the south were poor. So because they were poor, they had like a lot of the foods we love, you know, poor people had to make things work with what they had available. So given a case in point, you know, and I'm not going, today it's a different world. We have trading, you know,
instant.
You can get, I mean, we see it today. You can get a fish from the other side of the world in a matter of a day. Yeah. But back, you know, before the migration wave, none of this shit happened. So, you know, you had a section of Italy that didn't get the best cut of meats, didn't get any of those things.
Or not enough meat, huh?
In fact, on the streets of Sicily, you can get, they still do it today. I'm going to mess this up. Fritta mista. And basically what they do is they take all the odds and ends and trimmings of different animals and dip it and bread it and fry it, and you just pay for it and you eat. God only knows what you're eating, but it's... So back to your question about the meatball, was the meatball, if I had to assume, was a creation because they didn't get these big, glorious cuts of meat. So they had inferior meat, you grind it up, and then you add seasoning to it. And then in the south of Italy, really all that, Spain and France, I'm going to go on a limb out here and say it, that they're a bread culture. And Sicily in particular is a bread crumb cuisine. There is no wasting of the bread. So, you know, they would put bread in the meatball to stretch it, to feed large families. And I think, and I know I'm not the only one talking about this, but when they came here, they still made them the way they had at home, but with each generation of Italians that got more and more prosperous. And not only that, they were more geared to work all the time. like any working family, they wanted to take shortcuts and then, and delineate from the original recipe in order to save time, whatever. And it changed the meatball as we know it today. And it's funny because when I have conversations with people and they've seen all the different things I cook, they're like, what's one of the most difficult things you cook, Joseph? And when I tell them, I'm like, I don't know, that's tough, but I'm going to say up there is the meatball. And they look at me like I have cauliflower growing out of my ears. Like, what are you talking? What? How is a meatball difficult? Because most people are accustomed to, the Sam's bag cocktail meatballs or the Subway meatball, or most people think it's just a bunch of, you take a big old jar of McCormick Italian seasoning, dump it in there, mix it up, and throw it in the sauce, and there it is, voila. But it's not like that. So I try to tell people it's a process. I mean, you have to. The way I do it, and I don't have any problems sharing it on the show because I've told my wife, you can watch me make this 5 times and you're not going to get it right. You have to really be into it and you have to keep trying. But I take old bread, break it up, and I make what they call a pane de molica, which is like, soaked bread. Some people soak it in water. My mother used to soak it in milk. I've even heard of people soaking the bread in white wine. I've never done that, but, this is the difference. Most people say, why are you going to go through all that? Just put breadcrumbs in it. Well, most of the breadcrumbs you buy, and for everybody listening, I do use store-bought breadcrumbs for various things.
Yeah, it's not just making your own bread, doing every
right. I don't want people listening to this thinking, man, that guy makes his own breadcrumbs to fry a pork chop.
Yeah.
Like, no, I use store-bought ones too, but when it comes to the meatball, I make my own breadcrumbs and bread filling. And I've had people say, well, man, we're not poor anymore. Why do you need to put bread in the meatball? Well, what happens is with that bread, when you're frying or cooking a meatball, like anything, just like when you cook a steak or a hamburger on the pit, it starts excreting fat juices. And that's what causes the flames to come up. So those little nods of bread in that meatball, instead of that fat escaping completely, that bread is like a sponge and it grabs it. And that's what keeps the meatball moist and tender. And as far as seasoning the meatball, I've been making them all my life. And you've eaten them at my house I don't know how many times. And they're always good. But every now and again, you get that batch and you're just dumbfounded. You're like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And I've done it the same way. Why is this any different? And what I try to tell people, imagine trying to make 1-2 dozen chocolate chip cookies and making sure each cookie has the same amount of chips. It's not going to happen. But back to the question you had, meatballs are not something, if you've ever had a real meatball,
It's hard to convey that to people because I've tried to describe that to other clients or friends who have the same sentiment that, man, there's no big deal about a meatball until you've had one. And I was the same way with the meatball and the espresso. Until you've had something good, different, and great, you've only know this other thing,
right?
Whether it's like a commoditized kind of product,
right? And then, we as consumers in this country, and we all want things convenient and fast, and don't want to do the work, and we've marginalized that thing that is what I consider just meat. Something that people look at and be like, man, it's just so...
It's an investment in time.
Yeah. And I don't eat meatballs out. Even at Italian restaurants that I really, really like, that's one thing I won't touch, And who knows? Maybe I'm missing out. Maybe they make a great one. But more than likely, no.
Yeah. So going back to your mother, and you don't have to discuss it if you want, but what was the situation, how you got your recipe?
So... this is a very interesting topic because, as I got into, being a young man and dating and going out with girls and boy, did I love to play the field, man.
Mm-hmm.
And, it didn't take long for me to realize that most girls, they're not taught to cook and cater to one's wants and needs anymore. We're just not living in that kind of world. So it didn't take me long, I said to myself, geez, man, my mom's not going to be alive forever. And I don't think I'm ever going to meet anybody that's going to cook anything near of what she cooks. So unless I want to eat in restaurants all my life, I need to start bugging this woman to teach me how to cook.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mother would teach me how to cook all these different things. But there were certain recipes when I would try to get it from her, she would be like, Mom, when you going to teach me how to make bregiolone or, something? Well, why don't you come help me? She'd try to, get off the topic. And then if I kept pressing her, well, I'll just make it for you. And then after she passed away, I noticed some of my aunts, her sisters were same thing. I would try to get certain recipes from them and they would never give it up. And then finally,
it was kind of like the old tradesman that never wanted to teach the young journeyman all the tricks of the trade.
Right. And so
they didn't want to become irrelevant.
So when one day I asked my aunt, like, why is that? And she said, because if we show you everything, we don't have anything to hold over your head for it to come visit us. If I show you how to cook everything, like, hey, Joe, I'm making, lasagna. Oh, well, I got that thing and, I'm really busy this week. But if I don't know how to make it, and I haven't had it since the last time you made it, you're going to break all your affairs.
Yeah.
Oh, no, excuse me, boss. I'm sick. I can't make it to work today. And you're going to go run over there.
Yeah.
So.
Is that typical in the Italian-American?
I can't say that for sure, but it was typical in my family.
Yeah.
But eventually when my mom was getting close to the end and she was getting, ill and she finally upped the holiest of holies, and she walked me through it a few times. She wrote it down with me. And boy, when I first started learning how to make that, you can ask Gus, you've had him on the show.
Yeah.
It would take me the whole day. And it's just, I didn't have the muscle memory. It's still
new.
Now.
Like there's intimidation factors or.
Yeah. But now I've been doing it so many years. I mean, if you watch me flip meatballs in hot grease, you're like, damn, man, that guy's fast.
Yeah.
I've been doing it all my life, In fact, it's funny because I was in the North End years ago in Boston, in Little Italy, and I happened by chance to pull up a chair next to this old man who was retired out of the electricians union there. So when I told him I was an electrician, we started talking. It turns out this guy he loved to cook. So we started talking about cooking and how we cook and all of this stuff. And when I started delving into my ritual for meatballs, his jaw hit the ground and he's like, nobody does that anymore at all. And he pulled the guy that owned the restaurant. And he said, man, you need to get with this guy, man. They were just like dumbfounded because nobody does do that anymore.
It's the manual, analog, time grabbing type of process, huh? People want the shortcut.
You got to make the commitment. And not everybody has the time or even wants to donate the time to do that.
Yeah.
And, I understand that. I sympathize, The only thing I'm unsympathetic to is don't tell me that a meatball is a meatball because it's not.
Yeah.
It's okay if you like yours out of the jar. Sure. That's fine. But don't tell me they're all the same because they're not.
Yeah.
And don't tell me they're easy because if you, like you said, if you had a real one, you would know.
Yeah. And so I'm sympathetic to that notion of if someone's never had that kind of product, it's not even worth trying to convince them otherwise.
Right, unless you're willing to sit them down and make them eat it.
And I hope that they would be honest if they're going to critique like your coffee or any dish that you create. If they would be honest too about, all right, you know what? Yeah, this guy was right. He was onto something. Right. Maybe it might not be the best, but it's different. And I can tell there's some quality to it.
Right.
There's some care that went into it.
Well, it's like when I go and rehab or fix or install these brand new espresso machines at some of these businesses, and like I said, going back to the super automatic computerized machines, I've been told that they will make the same product as what I'm accustomed to. Now, I'm not saying that it's bullshit, but I've been working on these machines now for a little over 2 years, which is not a long time, but that's a long enough time for me to sit here and say, I'm not saying that they can't, I just haven't seen it yet. Because the day comes where where I get one out of one of those machines and it tastes just like the stuff I make at my house or close, then I'll sit here and own up to it and be like, you know what? You're right. They're capable. But I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's just, I love the story too that you were telling me. Like you on some of these calls. I love hearing your calls when you go out to certain shops. And we're not gonna blast any particular shop.
No, I won't name names. It's not nice.
But whether it's a shop or you're testing out a product with a certain maybe coffee brand, and you like taste, like you don't even want to taste it. It's not the Italian
right.
philosophy.
Or even
let's
sometimes
say.
with just the equipment. Like it was a big company. In fact, I'm not going to name the name, but this company was kind of one of the big companies that started with the whole, small batch roasting, and they're nationwide. And I was helping set up a kiosk for them at a convention at the convention center.
Okay.
And so I'm wiring up everything, plumbing in the machines. And I asked the guru, like, where's the grinders? And he showed me the grinder. And I'm like, okay, where do you want it set up at? And I was like, is it a stepped or a stepless? And he's like, huh? I was like, is it a step grinder or a stepless? He's like, I don't know. I was like, never mind. Yeah. Like, it's like, man, if I know that, you should definitely know that, you know? So.
And to illuminate people that don't know, what is a step versus stepless grinder?
So a stepped grinder basically just has predetermined set parameters for different grind settings. Mm-hmm. And a stepless grinder, you can manipulate it within fractions.
Yeah. It's almost like an infinity.
Right.
Where you can dial it in without the click.
You can get in a lot of trouble if you're not careful, because you'll be like, oh my God, where's that one little setting? Oh, wow. And for people listening, they're like, dude, what's the big fucking deal about a goddamn grinder? And the grinder is really the most important part of the espresso equation, because you can have the greatest machine in the world, but if you don't have the right grind size, it's nothing. It's nothing, because the water is going to find a path of least resistance. And when you have ununiform grinds, you got some big grinds over here and some talcum powder type grinds over here, that water is going to come down. Oh, just like a dam. Oh, here's the imperfection.
It just goes to that one little easy,
and just eases on out. Yeah, and then you wind up with espresso, not espresso. So the grind is super important. Our friend, this was years ago, another guy that I converted, had espresso at my house, was totally an epiphany, had to have it, all this stuff. But the guy, which today he makes a lot more money than you and I, he's in the medical field, but at the time he didn't want to spend the money. And he goes, wait a minute, I can't just get one of these machines off of eBay? I said, yeah, you can get one off of eBay, but no matter what machine you get, don't skimp on the grinder. And for him, it just didn't compute. He was like, I don't understand.
He disregarded it. Huh?
Isn't the machine the most important thing? Like, why is the grinder so important? I tried to illustrate to him, just as I said before, and he just wasn't having it. I guess he thought I was just pulling his leg, blowing smoke up his ass, and he just didn't want to shell out the money for the grinder. So he bought this used machine off of eBay at the time for about $80, fooled with it at his house. Like most people, got frustrated, said, man, this thing it sucks. And I'm like, why does it suck? He's like, it doesn't make coffee like it does at your house. He drops it off at my house. He says, here, you can fool with it. It took me dialing in on my grinder a few times, and it was making coffee just like my machine. And he came over, I made it, and he was like, dude, what the fuck did you do? That came out of the machine from eBay? I said, yeah, motherfucker. He was like, really? I said, yeah. He said, well, what did you do? What did you have to fix? I said, I didn't have to fix anything. I have the grinder. You need the grinder to make it, Yeah. So, yeah.
So many variables. And if a person who wants to even make coffee at home or espresso at home, if they don't take into account all these different factors, they're not going to maybe get that kind of Italian style.
Right. And
products.
Like I was saying before, when I wake up in the morning, I'll be honest. And I love espresso and all of that stuff. I just don't feel like dicking around with it in the morning.
Yeah.
So I just make my little Bialetti on the stove, drink my coffee, eat my breakfast. But, in the noon and after dinner, I use the machine.
Yeah, it's like your treat.
Right. Because I know what it entails. And in the morning, I just don't feel like fooling with it. So I get why somebody wouldn't want to fool with all of that. But if that's if you want what I'm putting out at my house, then you need to pony up. You need to do the due diligence, get the right stuff, and it's not rocket science. You just got to be willing to go there, you know.
Yeah.
Unless you use, not the right coffee, and then, like the whole thing we were talking about with this light roast movement. Not saying that it's bad.
Yeah, no, it's just like, look, some people like vanilla, some like chocolate.
Right. And that's the thing. Now that I'm on the the technician side of things, so a lot of people were big proponents of light roast because they say dark roast gums up the burrs on the grinder, which in all honesty, it does. It does. There's no I cannot tell you that it doesn't, because it does. But here's what they're not telling you. That when a light roast coffee is really, really lightly roasted, it's almost like a pebble, like a rock. It's really hard. So the light roast actually runs the blades down, the burrs, faster than a dark roast, which means you're changing out blades more frequently. And also, a lot of high-end machines now are using ceramic blades. And people are wondering, well, what's the big deal with ceramic blades? Well, the Italians have figured out that with the ceramic blades, when you're grinding, it's even cooler than the traditional steel blades. And the reason why you want your blades cool is because you don't want to cook the coffee as it's being ground. So think about that. But the ceramic blades don't last as long as the steel. So if you're running light roasted coffee, which, like I said, is hard like a rock, through ceramic blades, they're gonna clunk out pretty fast. So,
So yeah, it's not maybe beneficial from a cost benefit viewpoint to just stick with light roast from that end, where they think dark roast gums up the blades. So let's go with light roast. But actually, light roast might cause more damage in the long term, huh?
Well, it's a different type of damage. It's faster.
Okay.
It's faster.
Okay.
Okay. And but I think the whole light roast movement is like you and I have talked about, and you're the guru. I mean, it's all about marketing. Sell people something and convince them that it's the be all end all.
Yeah, this notion of like single origin, like you've alluded to, we see it in the cigar world. I'm not saying single origin is bad.
Neither am I.
Right.
Neither am I.
But you and I both know, and so it used to be in our industry that when you got a Honduran cigar, it was a cigar made in Honduras that incorporated mostly Honduran tobacco. But as time went on, kind of like the Italians probably discovered with coffee, there's so much benefit in terms of like flavor profiles or complex profiles when you diversify and try multi-origin and figure out these blends so you can get like a different product. Not to say that there aren't single origin cigars or coffees that are bad.
No.
But to me, it can be one-dimensional.
Right. And you better know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You better know what you're doing, with a single origin, because it's a single origin. You're going to get what you're going to get.
Yeah.
It's
any flaws it has is probably magnified.
Right.
Whereas maybe a multi-blend, whether it be cigars or coffee.
It could be more forgiving at
Yeah,
times.
you can maybe hide certain elements or bring out certain characteristics you want.
Right. And so for years, just recently in the last couple of years, I've been ordering various roasts in the States that do a pretty good, what I consider a really good blend.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah, what are some of those? You've taught me about some of those.
So there's a company that I still occasionally purchase from, Grande Italia. It's in Newport. It's in Connecticut.
Okay.
And they roast in the States, and they make a really good product. And I just recently, in the last 2 years, started purchasing coffee from this company out of Brooklyn called Nicoletti. And I got to tell you, man, it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay? It really is. And there's probably other ones out there that are good or better. I just haven't had the chance to, deviate and check them out. But that used to be one of the big arguing points to people in the industry, like, why are you going to order something from Italy? It takes so long to get here, and by the time it gets here, it's because unlike cigars and wine, coffee's enemy is oxidation, time. It's not something you can hold on to for, it's not like these, you know.
Well, I'll stop you there. At least it can be with wine and cigars to a certain extent.
Right.
Maybe not cigars have a different kind of maturation process when it comes to aging and oxidation. It's more forgiving. In fact, there's more benefit with aging some cigars. Wine, it's fine because it's sealed. It's once you open it up, that's when
Right.
oxidation. But with coffee, I agree that
Yeah.
it's
So
more perishable.
right. So a lot of these people that are turning to coffee that's roasted in the States, they want it because it's the freshest of the fresh.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's actually, they're actually not saying something wrong. That's actually correct. Like, it's, if you can get your coffee from the quickest source roasting wise, you're in a better world in terms of quality. But here's the deal. The reason why for many years I still ordered coffee from Italy, despite the fact that it wasn't going to be as fresh as, say, a place that roasted in Covington or wherever, is what we were talking about earlier. Even though this might not be, it might have sat on the boat too long and it might not be as fresh as it was when they roasted it, the Italians' capability of blending. So the freshness might be compromised as opposed to somebody, selling you coffee in Covington or wherever. I'm just using that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But their capability for blending is inferior compared to the way these people in Italy blend.
Or not as knowledgeable.
Right. So I was willing to forego the freshness factor for the taste factor, you know. But lately I've been finding some places in the States where they do a good job blending and the roasting is fresh. So that's actually a good thing.
And there's some places I'm sure that might make a great blend and roast locally. Man, I just saw like some new spot in Walker, Louisiana, of all places. Like, who would have thought Walker? Like, there's an operation I think that's starting to roast or blend their own beans.
I've been wanting to get into the roast game, but man, I'm terrified. I mean, you see how I am about meatballs. Could you imagine me sitting in my garage doing that? You wouldn't see me for fucking months.
Yeah.
Because I'd have to sit there and continue. It'd definitely be, but I've always been interested in it because, you get a lot of, there's so many.
There's more control now
Yeah.
of that supply chain.
Right, exactly. And, but, as we were, had touched on earlier, is that, you to get the blend right, man, that's
There's a lot of experimenting, I'm sure.
a lot of trial and error, I would assume. Yeah, without a doubt, and then there's the preparation aspect, like I can remember years ago, just for shits and giggles, I would have people come over and I would get whole bean community coffee. Now look, I still enjoy community drip coffee. I like it. I mean, people might say, oh yeah, it's the best. And some people are like, oh, it's terrible, but it doesn't bother me. But I used to occasionally take whole bean community coffee, run it through my grinder, you tamp it, put it in an espresso machine and serve it to people. I'm like, God damn, it's delicious.
What?
And when I tell them what it was, they're like, no way. And it's like, the reason why it's good is because of my preparation method, my extraction.
And that reminds me of when I went to Italy and you see the baristas there, a lot of them are older men usually. And so I kind of realized, you know what, there's a different philosophy in that people there from the barista side view it as a career.
Yeah.
And they've probably have pulled tens of thousands of shots, maybe hundreds of thousands of shots in their career. So they have that like
muscle memory.
Yeah.
And knowledge.
And the nuances of like the pressure and the grind, even how to tamp it. Whereas, and I'm not like, critiquing, I guess. Maybe I am, but like most of the baristas in this country are usually younger. And they're still learning. I mean, I'm sure there's some that were masters of it.
I'm glad
right?
you brought that up because
I'm sure they're masters. Like there's some masters, right?
I'm going to stick up for these people. Whereas before I got into the side of like I said, I go to these shops, I service all the equipment, I repair the equipment. But before I got into this, I used to just think that most of the kids that worked at Starbucks were just there for the hours, and they were just there, till they get their degree or whatever it is they're pursuing in life. And for some of them, that very much is the deal. But dude, there's a lot of kids at Starbucks that work there, and they actually give a shit.
Yeah.
Which is something had I not got in the business, I would have never thought that. So there are some kids there
There's some merit
that
to it, yeah.
actually give a shit about what they're doing, you know. But as you were saying, most people that work in a cafe here, not only themselves view them, but people on the other side of the counter is like, oh, it's a burger flipper job. It's a French fry job.
They discount it.
Right.
It's like not respected.
Right.
And so some of those staffers might not care either. Because the customer view of them is not as respectful. So then why should they care? So they almost kind of like walk into that expectation.
Yeah. And that's not, that's, look, man, I've had a bunch of jobs throughout my life, and there's been jobs where I've had, and I'm like, I went in there like, oh, I'm going to do this and do that. And then the consumer on the other end of the spectrum kind of just over time just erodes your pride. And you're just like, man, fuck it, dude. I just want to get the hell out of here and go home.
Yeah. Yeah. They create this cynicism within the service industry sector. It's like, man, if I'm not getting respected or why should I care then?
I don't expect everybody to do it, but I've always said that everybody should work. Everybody should earn a paycheck at least once in their life through tips and through a shovel, because you will learn that you will have some sort of respect for that person, you know, for real.
Yeah.
You know, you may be a doctor and that person might be a plumber, but, you know, don't look down on him, because I can tell you, working in as an electrician, when you give people a bill, and I've always been very reasonable, they're like, but you're an electrician. Like, why am I paying you all this money? You're not doing a kidney transplant. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they just have this preconceived, you're just a menial blue-collar worker. And then, like, I'll give you an example. A buddy of mine who is now an anesthetist, he did get accepted into medical school, but he was an RN, and he was a nurse practitioner. And when I was studying to become a master electrician, he had picked up a couple of my code books and all these other different books, and he was just kind of thumbing through it. And he was like, God, you have to know all of this? And I'm like, all right, I don't have to know all of it, but I have to know the theory. I have to know most of it. But I had to explain to him that some of these books, they're kind of like law books. Like if you're hazy on something, you have to be able to navigate through it. Okay, this needs
It's
to
almost
be
like an academic approach, huh?
right. And he was floored. He was like, I had no idea you had to know all of this stuff. I'm like, yeah. I mean, you can teach anybody to pull wire, but to make the correct, assessments on voltage drops, wire size, terminations, all that stuff, you got to know what you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and it just kind of reminds me of, like, from our point of view, being a tobacconist. When I first, I had a track, and I've repeated myself multiple times throughout the podcast, that I had a career path for Wall Street or in the financial world, but I ultimately chose the cigar route because it was my passion. It might not be the most glamorous of jobs, perhaps, but for me, I didn't care about that. I didn't care about the money per se. I loved it because I love cigars and the art of the cigar. Maybe views have changed of that, how people maybe and consumers look at tobacconists.
Yeah.
But there's some shops who maybe hire young kids who are maybe temporary and maybe don't care.
Right.
But I always assign that responsibility to the owner or the manager to decide how to implement that culture. But that's kind of one of the things we pride ourselves on is people who are curious about becoming a tobacconist. You can either treat this like a temporary job, but there are opportunities for you to make it a career. Kind of like the baristas in Italy, that's their craft.
Yeah. And I mean, in some of those little pockets of Italy, those people are the people that work behind that counter, like, they're important.
They're like rock stars, too.
Yeah.
Huh?
They're just, hey, wait, they're not a peon,
Mm-hmm.
but, yeah. And I mean, because they're providing something that these people need, and like you were, illustrating before, is like, you might go to some cafe in Italy and there's some guy back there in his 20s or 30s and he's been there 8 years. Well, he's the new guy.
Yeah. Even though 8 years probably in this country is a long time.
Yeah, 80 years here, you're still here? What went wrong in your life?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's definitely profound. Yeah. Now, in your job, and you've kind of told me some of these stories about like inexperienced operations, and all jokes aside, I mean, I'm sure you've kind of have taught some of these operations a thing or two about your experiences, like how to treat coffee.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about like consulting, or I'm sure you've just kind of provided your insight. Maybe it's not.
So most of the time when I go on a job, initially I did because I was passionate about it. But as time wore on, my passions started to be eroded because most of the people around, they would just, if it was the people working, they just were like, yeah, okay, whatever, And then the owners or the businessmen, they're looking at a spreadsheet, they're
Dollars and cents.
Yeah, it's just a business, I guess in a way as it should be. I mean, as a businessman, you got to look at it through a different set of lens.
Yeah.
Even if it pains you. But I would always, now when I go on these jobs, I really only offer information if somebody is overly inquisitive.
Yeah, and you can tell
and then I can
see
that they're actually interested, and then I'll give them what I think or what I would do, and then a lot of times some of them are kind of taken back because they look at me as like the tool monkey, like, oh wait, you have an espresso machine? Like, yeah. I even have one at my house that I refurbished, that was sitting in a warehouse, just a pile of rubble. And I took that thing apart bit by bit by bit. And I had to order about 3 different parts for it. Luckily, I could still get them because the machine, when I opened it up, it was from 2011. And rebuilt that thing. And you've had it out of that machine.
Mm-hmm.
Balls to the wall, real espresso.
Yeah.
And so when somebody in I come across somebody who's inquisitive, oh yeah, I unload everything on them and see, because I can tell that they're interested, but I don't come across people like that too much.
What's the most expensive machine you've ever worked on, and what was the brand, if you remember?
Let me think about this. Home or commercial?
Commercial.
Commercial.
Yeah, on your calls. Because you told me about it, like one client it was a residential kind of client, right? He was a doctor, and he had
so there was 2. Yeah, we got to bring that up.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So, probably the most expensive, and I could be wrong because I didn't look at the invoice, but in my mind, I know definitely there was a 2-group Faema in a restaurant in New Orleans with E61 group heads. And for people not in the know, the E61 group is a solid all brass group that Faema patented, but other companies use that. That's an expensive machine. You're probably talking up in the $25,000.
Wow.
And then we just recently did a Nuovo Simonelli 2-group with volumetrics. That's probably around the same sticker price, And as far as on the home end, La Marzocco makes a home machine, which I almost pulled the trigger on, but I didn't, called the Linea Mini.
Oh, I saw that.
With a pre-infusion paddle.
I saw that on the website.
And they're pretty cool. And but those machines, I think, that's a home machine. They retail for, I think, $6,000. And then if you go ahead and splurge on anywhere from $7,000 to $2,000 or $1,000 on the grinder, now you're into it for $7,000-8,000, And back to the story, which I want to talk about. So we'll go to work one day. The dispatch calls, says you need to go to this house uptown and go pick up their machine. So I go pick it up. It's a La Marzocco Linea Mini, which I just said is a $6,000 machine. Bring it to the shop. Fixed it. It was a relatively easy fix. Go to deliver it, and the homeowners weren't there. I think they were originally from Ohio. It's not important where they're from, but they weren't home. So the nanny let me in. So I go inside with this $6,000 machine, and I asked her, where does it sit? She told me where. So I put it on the kitchen counter, gorgeous house, put it on the kitchen counter, And back to, it reminds me of the story I told about my friend who didn't want to buy a grinder for the eBay machine.
Mm-hmm.
I put this $6,000 machine on their grinder. I mean, on their counter.
Okay.
Now, look, $6,000 to these people might just be wallet fodder. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
whereas
chump
for
change.
me, that's a big investment, you know, and I put it down and I'm looking around and I notice there's no grinder. And I'm like, maybe they just haven't got that yet.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking, you know? And then I keep looking, gazing the counter, and I see what some people call a whirlybird grinder. It's just this blade that spins around and it just chops your coffee into all these different size granules, which I guess you could use it for drip. It still isn't optimum, but it would suffice. It's definitely not for espresso.
grade, yeah.
So I look and I'm like, there's no way that they're using this whirlybird grinder with this $6,000 machine. And then I look even further and there's this coffee. And the only reason I know where the coffee came from is because when my wife and I go shopping at Costco, it's just some big bulk coffee that comes off of a pallet, you know. And I don't know, maybe the coffee's good. I've never had it. But I started just sitting there doing the, like a $6,000 machine, $30 Target grinder, and Costco coffee. And, you know, like, in my mind, why would you spend $6,000, you know, for that? I don't, but hey, you know.
Yeah. Would an analogy, a proper analogy be like you buy like this, I don't know, Bentley, just like high-end car, but then you cheapen out on like the cheapest gas in town with like all these like additives that are bad
Right.
and corrosive.
Yeah. It's
When it probably
buying a
needs like the
sports-
most, it needs the most supreme gas.
Right. Or it's like buying a sports car and putting antique radial tires on it.
Yeah.
Well, they're cheap, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's kind of frustrating for me from the cigar side. Someone buys like a Davidoff. They're happy to buy like a $30 or $40 Davidoff, but they're going to cheapen out on the cutter, like a $3 cutter. It's like, man, I would not cut that expensive cigar with that cheap cutter.
Right.
Like, do yourself a favor. Just invest in like an SU DuPont, you know, or Calibri.
And like I said, unfortunately, I don't have that, you know, that type of bankroll, that oak tree bankroll where, you know, oh, well, it's $6,000, whatever, you know? I mean, I don't know. Today, $6,000 really isn't a whole lot of money, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you tell some person, yeah, how much you pay for your coffee machine? $6,000. They're going to look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
And I get that.
Right.
I get it.
Because the norm here in this country, like, oh, just a $60.
Dude,
pot
that's
from-
why Nespresso took over the world. I mean, it makes espresso-esque type beverages, and it's relatively affordable.
At least it's not espresso.
Right. Now, I'll be honest with you. Once again, you know, to the people that own Nespressos, I went to go do an electrical job last weekend, and the owner of the house said, would you like an espresso? And I didn't want to be rude.
Right.
I was like, yeah, of course. And they had the Nespresso machine. They made me one. I drank it. Was it like what I have at home? Fuck no. But I was like, damn, this is a lot better than some of the stuff you go into coffee shops for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I could see how that, you know, that product, you know, it delivered something just good enough. Or in my experience, it was even better than some of the stuff I get at these single origin light roast fucking places that it's terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so, you know, it kind of opened my eyes. I get it, you know.
And look, in summary, if someone likes the single origin or the light roast, or for me, I just don't like, to me, they almost have like this acidic, like ultra flowery profile, a lot of them, that I just don't like. And I like the Italian way because I guess it's because I'm a cigar guy.
Right.
To me, it's just more chocolatier, I guess, or like fuller.
One thing I've learned, and God, I really want to put them on blast because I can't stand their product, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. But there is a coffee roaster in New Orleans that I think they strictly do light roast. I'm not sure, but that's their flagship,
That's their
the
bread
light
and butter,
roast.
huh?
Yeah. And when they first, you know, had their flagship location, I went there hoping to
wanting
this, product from my house to this roasting place. And it was a light roast. And I've actually had light roast that I enjoy. But I learned something that the 3 times, and I went there 3 times. It's not like I went there once and was like, oh, this ain't for me. I gave it 3 chances. And one thing I've learned about light roast, if you don't get it right, it's not forgiving at all. Like a dark roast, one would say, oh, well, dark roast, they taste burnt, they taste bitter. And a lot of times that there's some truth to that. But one thing I've learned with a dark roast coffee, if it's not exactly good or if it happens to have that burnt kind of bittery taste, you can add a little bit of sugar to it or milk or whatever, and it's palatable. But a light roast, if it's not on a gnat's ass good, you can put no sugar, sweet and low, 3 tablespoons of regular sugar, honey, whatever, and it still has that sour profile. There's no getting around it. Like if you're starting out roasting coffee and you're a novice, the darker roast, they're just going to be a little bit more forgiving. And for everybody listening, I prefer like a medium to dark. It doesn't have to be black and oily, but I definitely don't want it to be, practically raw either. Like a medium dark. That's kind of my preference.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to light roast, man, if you don't have the blend right, that's just my taste experience. For someone else, they might think that's the greatest thing in the world. It's just not for me. It's like when sushi first became big here. Once again, like the Subway, I was like, man, all the wonderful seafood we have in here in Louisiana, that ain't gonna work. Once again, Joe was wrong again. I was wrong again.
Mama was wrong again.
Yep, I was like, God, these people are going AP over this sushi.
Yeah.
Now, if my grandfather would have seen that, granted, he came from a time and a place, he would have said, man, why are all these people paying all this money to eat bait?
Yeah.
But hey, that's a big deal. People love sushi, and I've had some sushi I enjoy, but once again, if that's your thing, but when sushi was getting big here, I didn't think it would ever last because of all the wonderful seafood we have here.
Yeah.
Preparation is endless in Louisiana of how to prepare seafood.
And I'd be willing to bet that there are probably in the sushi world, there are probably some that kind of cheapen out and pass it off as sushi. But I bet there are like some real legitimate houses that buy like high grade and know how to prepare
without a
it.
doubt.
But it just gets lumped in this country. To me, and I might be wrong.
Well, you got to realize we've talked about this with cooking. The same applies to cigars, to anything. The more you have to churn out, the quality takes a back seat. It's kind of like I've had this happen over the years with you. I'll buy a cigar from you, and the first few months, it's like one of the best cigars. And then all of a sudden, it's good, but it ain't the same.
Yeah.
And it's because it got so popular that the quality kind of suffers because they can't keep up with the production.
Yeah. And if they're greedy, they're going to cut corners perhaps.
So I feel that way with sushi, There's probably some really legitimate sushi purveyors out there that get the best of the best, top notch, and it's legitimate and it's delicious, and you're going to pay for it. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are paying that same premium for, some shit that was defrosted in a seal bag.
Right.
Yeah.
But
one thing, this is just my own theory, and it's a theory. You can agree with me or disagree with me. But I think one of the things that made sushi so popular in this country, or in just not to mention the whole it's healthy and it's lean. That appeals to people for another reason. But I've noticed with most people's palates in the States, it's a condiment country.
Yeah.
It's a condiment country. Put some hot sauce on it. Oh, I want to get put more butter on it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, do you have any ketchup? And then the whole thing looks like a red blob, And I think with sushi, a lot of people love the sauces.
Yeah, the soy sauce.
And
the wasabi, which is not real wasabi. Did you know most of that wasabi is actually horseradish based?
Did not know that.
Because true wasabi is actually really expensive. It's almost like saffron.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive product. And you better believe that, especially like these all-you-can-eat such sushi buffets, they're not going to put that dollar or invest that cost into real wasabi. They're going to get that horseradish greened paste.
Right. And you know, I mean, and like I said, from a business owner, you got to figure out a way to keep your dick up, you know? I mean,
Yep.
and
the American consumer, unfortunately, a lot of them might not know.
yeah. And like we were talking about, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like we were talking about, you know, why have superior coffee when you're going to put 8 gallons of almond milk and candy sprinkles and matcha powder and all that stuff? So it's the same thing with the sushi. Why as a sushi restaurant owner am I going to buy this fucking super superior fish when I know most of my customers is just going to be dipping it in a whole slew of sauces and they're not going to know the fucking difference?
No.
You know? I mean, somebody's going to get butt sore and be like, I do know the difference.
Yeah.
But come on, man.
Hey, and if you really know and can verify like your knowledge or experience, I mean, have you been to some of the great sushi houses in Japan to know? Or maybe some of the legitimate ones in this country to know?
Right. It's a condiment country, you know? It is. I mean,
I like that term, condiment country.
Yeah.
We are.
Yeah. I mean, look, hey, we have pizza, but our crust has cheese in the middle. Yeah. And if that's not
Stuffed
enough,
crust, yeah.
We got garlic, parsley, butter, hot wing sauce that you can dip that crust in, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, and for anybody listening in my house, we eat the crust. We do. We're not, my friend came in from Tampa. We all went to go eat pizza at Ancora's, you know, not a pepperoni joint, but we went to Ancora's. And, you know, I wouldn't say it's an expensive place to dine, but, you know, it's not going to be in the same price range as Papa John's or Domino's, but or
those $5 take and bakes or whatever.
Right, and here he is, him and his son, eating this quality pizza, and there's the crust just being tossed to the side.
Oh.
And here, my wife and I and our kids, we're munching down all the crust because man, they actually make really good dough there. And in fact, if you ever go there and instead of getting a pie, you get the homemade bread with the different toppings and stuff, their bread is phenomenal. And it shows, you know, and I've always kind of been of the mindset, like, you know, look, if you're eating Papa John's and you want to throw the fucking crust away, I get it. It's probably like a, you know, you could probably shoot it out of a 3-man sling and put out somebody's windshield, you know? Yeah. But, you know, if it's really good stuff and you're over there throwing the crust away because it's added calories, if you're that worried about added calories, what the fuck are you doing eating a pizza? What are you doing eating any of this stuff? Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And to your point, like I'm sure like this paradox, they call it the French paradox. It's this idea of why are the French, like compared to Americans, skinny, a little healthier, but like their foods are really rich. Yeah. So maybe it's not a paradox. Maybe it's something to do with the quality of ingredients. They're also probably more active. In Europe, everyone walks. Right. Well, like I feel like a whale when I go to Europe. I'm like, oh man.
Well, unfortunately,
they know I'm that American. That's lethargic.
I've made some good business decisions in my life. I've made some really good investments in my life. But unfortunately, I did not do all the right things in my life. I still work with my hands and tools. And, you know, I wish I would have stayed in school and got that degree but whatever that may be, I'm not sedentary at all. Right. I'm always walking. So when I tell people,
how many times of pasta do you eat?
I eat pasta on a low end 3 times a week, but usually, goddamn, sometimes it's every day of the week. And some people might be listening to this and be like, dude, how can you eat that every day? Well, I'm not eating it the same way every day. One day it's tomato sauce. The next day it's oil and garlic. The next day it could be zucchini or eggplant sauce. Or
I like the walnut and red pepper. Yeah.
That is one of my favorites.
Yeah, you illuminated. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you know, when people look at me, they're like, dude, how the hell are you that skinny and you're ripped and you eat that every day? Yeah. And part of that could be genetics. You can't discredit that, but also it's because I'm not sedentary. Dude, I used to be on construction sites with old men that literally ate McDonald's or Burger King 2-3 times a week, and they were this big around. You know why? Because they don't stop moving. Your body's pretty amazing in how it can get rid of garbage, you know? So, yeah, when I tell people that's how much I eat pasta and all of that, they're like, how do you stay so skinny, you know?
Yeah, they're probably skeptical or probably don't believe you.
They probably don't believe me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but you can ask my children.
Mm-hmm.
They'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my children, you know, I'm like, you know, there's going to come a time where you're going to tell one of your classmates, oh, we eat pasta almost every day. And they're going to look at you like, you crazy.
Yeah.
What?
but their peers' version of pasta might be that Kraft macaroni and cheese or some other artificial kind of processed
Right. Yeah. And I
pasta food.
Yeah. And it's also the ingredients you put on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and the quantity. Your serving size is not.
So just to let
big
people,
bowl.
Yeah, and that's another thing. In this country, pasta is served as an entree in a lot of places, whereas in Italy, it's not an entree.
Yeah.
It's mainly like it's kind of like it is important, especially in the South. Like they eat a lot of pasta, but it's not it doesn't take center stage. It's like the pasta, then the main course, maybe a little side dish, whatever. It's not like this, you know, salad bowl full of pasta with 4 different types of cheeses on it.
Yeah.
And don't forget about that stick of butter, you know, like
thick sauce with chunks in it.
Like a lot of people, they ask, Joe, how do you cook your fettuccine Alfredo? And I'm like, I don't make that. Like, does it exist in Italy? I don't know. I've been told that in the North they do all kinds. Like, just to reiterate, I've never been to the north of Italy. And I can't swear that this doesn't exist in Italy because I don't know. But I can tell you this much. I've never had it growing up in my house, you know, and I never had it in the south of Italy. In your travels, when you went with Dave to Italy, did you ever experience creamy, saucy fettuccine Alfredo?
I just don't remember. I don't remember that.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that speaks volumes right there.
Yeah.
Because
But maybe, I'm sure there is.
there might be.
And I wonder now, is it because if it does exist now, is it because they knew that the Italian American grew up with that, so they decided to export that back to Italy?
Right. Also, too, is like a lot of people, and I've traveled a lot in the south of Italy. You know, a lot of people get, if they've never been or just don't care to know, they probably assume there's people just out there eating pizza and lasagna all day and, you know, all these things that we think of when we think of Italians, you
That's
know, and
unhealthy.
it's nothing could be further from the truth. If you hug the coastline of Italy, which is not hard to do, being that it's a peninsula.
Like,
I mean,
yeah,
It's
exactly.
surrounded by water.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most of what you're eating is seafood. Seafood, the majority of the time, you know. So to really go out there and get some meatballs, you kind of got to go out there and look for it, you know. I've only eaten meatballs in Italy twice. Most of the time I go there, it's mainly all seafood,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But yeah, I mean, but yeah, people always, you know, like, dude, how do you stay so skinny and you eat like that? But you know, back when was that? About 8 or 9 years ago, I was kind of started putting on a little weight, and I started cutting a lot of things out of my diet, and I hung in there for close to 2 years, and then after a while, I came to the realization, like, man, is it working? Yes. Am I skinnier? Yes. Is this sustainable? No. But I did overlooked something, but man, does it work? If you buy a box of pasta in the store, it tells you on the damn label how many grams per serving.
Mm-hmm.
If you just weigh that shit up and cook it, it's only like this much pasta. And if that's all you're eating, it's not really that offensive.
Yeah.
You know, you're not eating this gargantuan thing of pasta, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Although I ain't going to lie, some nights at the house, that's all we want to do.
Oh, yeah. It's
Oh,
tempting.
my wife has always been like, can't we just eat pasta? Do we have to have like fish and this? And
Yeah.
it's like, no, you know, I'm all about the balance.
Yeah.
You know?
Balance, yeah. Well, look, Joe, we're going to leave it there. There's so much we can go into. We haven't even scratched the surface of your background and other
wow.
interests.
Well, maybe one day.
Yeah. You're always
if you want,
invited
you can
back.
You
Yeah.
can have me back, you know. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
And hopefully, I'll, if you would, if not, it's not a big deal, but maybe we'll get you a video. Maybe you can send me by the camera how you pull a shot from your Pavoni.
Sure.
Send it to us so we can incorporate it in the episode. If not, no worries.
Not a problem at all, man.
Yeah.
I do it every night.
Yeah.
You know?
Cool.
Every night, man. In fact, you know how a few days ago we were in 30, 28 degree weather?
Mm-hmm.
So, and here we go.
And up here in Baton Rouge, it was like 19 or 18 degrees.
So the lever machine is a lot less forgiving in terms of extraction than like other machines. And I had the grind setting on a specific grind and it was working. But then once it warmed up and got humid, I forgot to change the grind setting because I was like, oh, how crit. And then when I went to pull that shot, I was like,
oh, it's
it
different.
was too tight because the humidity and it's not cold anymore. So those are different parameters that come into play, you know. But
Another variable,
I enjoyed the talk and the cigar. And
what'd you think of that tatuaje? Even though we both had to relight it, just
I know,
get engaged and
sitting
talking.
there running my mouth, and you're talking about all these topics that are just so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard.
I will say though that this cigar holds up on a relight. There's some cigars when you relight it, it might be sour or bitter, like it's just done.
Yeah.
This one is very almost like the dark roast
And
version of
like
cigars.
I've always said,
it's very tolerable.
And I may not have the knowledge or the expertise in cigars that you do, but I've been smoking for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, there's a lot of cigars out there that the first third or half of it's pretty delicious. But there ain't too many cigars that you're over there damn near smoking your fingernails.
Yeah.
That
are still nice,
Right. Yeah.
Before it turns bitter.
Relighting this, it was good.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, sometimes you relight a cigar and it's like, all right, I've had enough.
Yeah. There's just something off about it.
Yeah.
But before we go, I have one final request. It's a rapid fire round of questions. Pretty simple. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
All right. Number 1, Tabasco, Crystal, or other?
Ooh. Oh, man. This is some offensive language to people.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Tabasco.
Okay.
Flavor-wise, Crystal. But I think I prefer the Tabasco because it has more of a vinegary, kind of viscous. And I love things with vinegar. But yeah, I guess Tabasco.
Okay. Number 2, favorite vacation destination?
Oh.
I already know which, but maybe not. Maybe not.
I'm going to say, this hurts.
Just one vacation destination.
The Florida Keys.
Oh, okay.
I would say Italy, but you and I, we go to the Keys, and it's just good food, good company, good cigars, out on the water every day, in the water every day, sun, and
the lobster saffron pasta.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the grilled lobster and the steamed lobster and the lobster ceviche and the lobster, the breaded lobster, the fried lobster. Yeah. And I mean, that's just part of it. Going out there hunting every day and spearfishing and catching lobster. I'm getting old, man. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do that. So I hold those vacations really, really special. But it's a tug of war between that and Italy. But my vote goes to the Keys.
Number 3, the ideal person you would want to smoke a cigar with, alive or deceased. It could be a celebrity or historical person.
Oh, my God, that's a tough one.
A friend or family. The one person you would want to smoke a cigar with.
Oh, my God. You know what? I guess I just got to be truthful. I'm going to say what first popped into my head, and then I'm going to say, first popped into my head, Frank Sinatra.
Yeah?
Because I love his music. And I've read a lot of stories about him. And for all I know, maybe the guy was an asshole. I don't even know. But he made great music.
Yeah.
And he comes from a really good back. Like, the story about him is really awesome. But for all I know, man, I might have a cigar with him. And it's like, man, this guy makes great music, but he's kind of a dick.
You never want to meet your heroes.
Right. You might be let down.
One of those things, yeah.
So that was the first thing that came to my mind when you said it. But the second, the more I think about it, probably be my stepdad, Louis Cohn. He was in the tobacco industry, and he was quite the character. And I wanted to know what he would think, that I'm,
where you are right now in life.
So,
we'll have to get some Louis stories in the future.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Number 4, Desert Island Cigar. If you only had one cigar to pick. You can only smoke one cigar for the rest of your life.
Current or discontinued?
Any cigar, yeah.
Oh God, it's been so long since I've had one. But back in the 90s, I used to love the flavor and the draw of the old Puro Indios from Honduras.
Yeah, the green label.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those were really good. And then I tried to revisit them later on, and it just wasn't the same smoke.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but back in its heyday, that was a good smoke.
Yep.
Yeah.
Number 5, who would you want to see here on a future podcast that I would interview?
Local? Or?
Anyone.
Man, that's tough. Alive, I'm assuming, correct? Like
Yeah.
Damn. Good Lord, that's. And I'm kind of tongue-tied on that. I'm trying to think. I don't know. That's a hard one.
No one from like Goodfellas, which I saw by the way last night again.
You mean like the movie?
Yeah, maybe like an actor.
Okay. Oh no, I can't say him because he's deceased now. But I was gonna say, and he was in Goodfellas, but his role was minor. But his role was major in The Sopranos. Tony Sirico.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in Goodfellas.
I know. Yeah, people don't probably know that.
Right.
He was in the beginning. He didn't have the gray hair, obviously.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And his story is very interesting because he took up acting in prison.
Oh.
He was like somewhat of the real deal. Like he was a crook, you know, and he got his way out by getting into acting. So you could always.
So I tell you what, I'll let you think about that question on a future appearance.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, I have to think about that. That's a tough question because I can't think of somebody like when you asked me about smoking the cigar, my mind
alive or dead. It could be anyone.
Went Sinatra, you know. I mean, I love that music, but I don't know, man. That's a tough one.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, sir. Appreciate you coming out, spending your time here with us.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
And everyone, thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you. And video is on.
We're good to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Lou has asked me here tonight to illustrate the little breakdown, talking about the bare bones lever machine. It is a lever machine. It's manual. It's not spring piston. There's no spring in this group. So basically what happens is when you lift this handle up, there is a threaded tube, copper tube that goes into this group and leads down into the boiler. And when you lift it up, that water gets channeled into this group. And then there's a piston in here, and as you pull down, that piston forces pressure onto the grinds. And this is basically, for lack of a better term, I mean, I'd say primitive, but it's more or less before. This was how they made espresso before machines like this and grater were ever even, a thing. So I have here a portafilter with some grinds out of the grinder. It's extremely important that you get the right grind, and just so everybody watching knows, sometimes I do not always get it right, even though I've been doing it a long time. Sometimes it's, with weather and humidity, it plays a part in the extraction. And, initially when I first researched this, I actually kind of just blew it off. Like, how critical is it? With these machines, I feel like it's a lot more forgiving. But with this thing, nothing is forgiving with this. I tell people all the time, if you want something consistent and ease of use, do not buy one of these. I love it, but this is very different. It's a different animal. So you get your tam. I have a tendency to, I have a predisposition to tamp harder than you probably should. So because of that, I grind a little coarser than most because I know I'm going to tamp a little harder than some people. And I'm going slow so you can kind of see like. So yeah, and like for all these people that are interested in doing something like this, you know, you can obsess about it, and sometimes you nail it and you get it right, but some days it's off, you know, it just it is. And I'm going slow so you guys can kind of see, you know, the whole procedure. I mean, you go to Italy, these guys bang this thing out. And I can normally move a lot faster than this, but I'm just trying to give you, as best I can, somewhat of a tutorial. So this is what you call a portafilter. I'm sure everybody that's went to a coffee shop has seen these before, but they haven't seen one of these. You don't see these in coffee shops that frequently. So what I'm going to do is put the filter in the portafilter, and then as I lift this up, water is getting channeled into the group. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. You'll hear this whoosh right there. That means water's coming into here. See if I can move this. And then right now what I'm doing is, and this is not something you have to do, but it helps also with the type of roast I like. Right now the water is sitting on top of the puck, saturating it. And what I'm going to do right now is press down just a little bit to kind of saturate it, and then come up, and then you'll hear the water come back down, and then we're going to very lightly kind of see.
Oh yeah, you're good.
You see it?
Yeah.
Okay, you see it. Okay, cool. And I'm just putting pressure. Now I'm going to ease off pressure. This is something you can't do in a semi-automatic machine unless it's really high end. We'll go up one more time, put another in. And then on the second pass, I like to put a little more pressure. And there's no noise because, as I had said before, my muscles are the pump.
Yeah, this is a pretty dark crema too, than I usually see, huh?
Yep, and it's a different beast. It's a different beast.
It's a shot of espresso via the fully true manual, huh?
Yep, as manual as it gets. Like I had said before, extremely temperamental. It is not for someone that does not want to. It's not for anybody that wants to. This is definitely something for somebody that's willing to take the journey.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to take the journey, please don't buy one of these.
I'm sure we'll get a God shot, right?
Oh yeah, no, you're gonna like this. Trust me. I know your palate, dude. Trust me, you're gonna love it.
Now, how much sugar do you recommend? Is there like a right amount,
Look,
or
some people like it with absolutely zero sugar.
okay?
Some people like it with a lot of sugar. I would say this or half of this spoon, and that's it.
Okay.
Well, hey, if you like it with nothing, go ahead. You know.
Well, appreciate you, sir. Yeah, really good. Like chocolatey.
It's fucking good, huh?
Yeah. Oof. You ruined me.
I knew you'd like that.
Or I like to say enlightened. And I appreciate you taking the time to give us a demo.
And like like I said, this machine will produce pretty much the identical. Well, some people would say, Joey, you're splitting hairs, but if you've been drinking it as long as I have, there's just something that's a little bit different about this. It's just more dense taste. Even though, this makes a mean one too.
And this is the La Pavone, right?
Yes.
This has a steam on as well.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah. So for people who want to steam or froth the milk to make like a cappuccino or latte, that's pretty neat. Very cool. Well, thank you, sir.
This machine is a semi-automatic.
Okay.
Yeah. This is what most now, as we discussed on the podcast, the very few boutique or independent cafes still use these. But much to my dislike, people are all going to the touchscreen, fully automated machine that really doesn't make anything like what we just drank or anything that thing would make. And one day we ought to do a video on this because I resurrected this machine from the dead.
Oh yeah, we'll have to get the story on that in the future episodes. So thanks again, man.
All right, man.
All right, take care.